Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Episode 94 of the Last Round Podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Whether you're joining us for the 94th time, or maybe it's over 100, or the first time, we appreciate it coming off the heels of probably what do you say, Mike? The busiest boxing weekend so far, at least in terms of maybe names in the sport, or what do you think?
Yeah, in terms of cards as well. Obviously, you had cards all over the place, from Matchroom to PBC. Top Rank had a show. Hennessy had a show in
Hennessy,
the UK. Mick Hennessy had a show on Channel 5, and then
Mick Hennessy. I thought you meant the drink, the drink that sponsors Canelo.
They should get together. Mick Hennessy, sponsored by Hennessy.
Sponsored by Hennessy. But like you said, fights and events all over the world this past weekend, which is great. It kind of shows that boxing is back. I mean, it's been back for obviously a couple months, obviously, but in the swing of things, it's great that there's a bunch of cars every weekend and stuff. Even if there's no fans, at least there's fights going on like this, and a lot of major promoters are back in some type of form, which is great. But as we mentioned at the beginning, thanks again for listening, guys. Let's just jump right into it, Mike, and start with this past Friday, the 21st of August. Let's see if I can get this with my my Spanish lingo here. Torre la Vega, Cantabria, Spain, on Fight TV. Your favorite and mine, sexy Sergio Martinez returns after a 6-year retirement. I believe he retired in 2014. He returns with a 7th round KO over Jose Miguel Fandino. What did you think, Mike?
I thought, punch-wise, he looked quite good, throwing the combinations. Obviously, you could see he was a little bit slow on his feet, due to injuries and age. But it was a kind of ready-made opponent for him. This is obviously in Spain, as you just said, and it looked like there was a little bit of a crowd there. Quite a lot of people on Twitter seemed to actually purchase it. I think it was $9.99 on Fight TV. Mm-hmm. And obviously sets up what I think everyone's kind of expecting is, Sergio Martinez against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. rematch.
I mean, I saw a couple clips of his return fight, obviously this past Friday. I mean, he looked, I don't know what people expected. He didn't really look like anything that popped out to me. I mean, he pretty much looked as I expected after 6 years. I mean, he's in his mid-40s. I think he's 45, 46. I mean, what did people expect? Were you impressed by the skill that he exhibited after 6 years?
No, obviously he wasn't going to roll back the years and come out like he did before. Obviously, Father Time always wins, as they say. But I think, he's come back, I think, just for the challenge because, we interviewed him and then, reading online, it's not like he needs the money. He's not come back for that. He's not blown all of his money that he's made. He's invested well. He's a celebrity on TV in Spain and Argentina. He's also a comedian, as we were, chatting to him about. So I think he's just come back for the challenge, fighters always have that burning desire, can they still do it? And if he fights like a Julio Cesar, if he fights Chavez Jr. or maybe even like an Oscar De La Hoya, I could see that maybe happening.
Right.
Chavez may be a little bit too young for him because obviously he's, just fought last year when we were there against Daniel Jacobs. But, fighting like an Oscar De La Hoya, they're both kind of older. I'm sure that would sell. Nostalgia always seems to sell.
Yeah, you're right. Nostalgia does sell. It does sell up until the point of the event, because after the event is when people are just pissed off. You're like, oh, I didn't get my money's worth, or this is boring, or this wasn't worth it. I don't know why you guys came back. What sells is the lead up to it, because the majority of the time it doesn't live up to the hype because there's so much hype behind it, or there's enough significant hype behind it that it generates interest. But I agree. Like I think he doesn't need the money. Like you mentioned earlier, he was on our show a couple months back. So if anybody wants to listen to that episode, just scroll down in our list of podcast episodes on different platforms, and it's on there. The video version is also on YouTube as well. But yeah, he did tell us that he's a stand-up comedian also over there, and then he's on TV over there. He's got a pretty good following in Argentina and Spain. I think you're right. I think he was just more he wanted to get back into it just to kind of do something, and then maybe get that one more payday with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I think how you touched on how we were in Phoenix, Arizona last December for Daniel Jacobs and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. He watched that fight. And regardless if Chavez Jr. did quit on the stool or he got a broken nose or what have you, that arena, especially us being there, those people were behind him up until that point. He was a rock star. Even Eddie Hearn told us the next day when he was on our show at the Fighter Hotel that he noticed that. He was like, yeah, this he can make a ton of money. He's like, if he won, he can get pretty significant fights and sell out more arenas or whatever. I'm pretty sure Sergio and his team saw that, and they were like, hey, you know what? Maybe we can get back in there and maybe get one more payday with Chavez Jr. I personally think that it was a Chavez Jr. Jacobs fight that pushed Sergio to really consider it and really pushed him to get back in the ring as he did this past Friday. What do you think?
I would agree with that. Seeing Chavez, I think me and you both thought that Chavez was actually winning that fight against Jacobs when he decided to pull himself out of it because he got a broken nose and, was struggling to breathe. And, I'm not a fighter and don't really want to disrespect a fighter, but that's, I'm pretty sure they've been through that, hundreds of times in sparring and in professional fights where people, dislocate the shoulder and they carry on fighting and stuff like that. So kind of a bit of a cheap way out of the fight, I would have said. So I'm thinking, I wonder if, Marin Villa was watching that, thinking to himself, if that's how easy he quits and, if I put pressure on him, I'm sure they'll make a lot of money. He's got a big following in Spain and Argentina, as we've said. Chavez has a huge legion of fans, in Mexico and in the US, thanks to his father. So it would definitely sell, for both of them. It's a nice, easy payday. And if you're Chavez, how many more chances is he going to get from those, those fans that he has?
Do you think Chavez, do you think he'll actually do it? Like go through with it and fight him again?
I think he has to. I don't even really know how much, Chavez likes to box. I think it's just that, he has the legion of fans thanks to his father. It's easier than getting a normal, proper 9-to-5 job for him. So I think he needs to really take, as many easy paydays as he can before people just get sick of seeing him or he just, his extracurricular activities take it so far that, that he can't make weight or, he has to retire because of ballooning in weight and, recreational drugs and stuff like that he uses.
Yeah, you're right. That is always some type of issue. But, wasn't there some news within the last few weeks or so that he's returning in Mexico in the near future, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do we have a date for that yet?
TV Boxeo put something out. I can't remember if they put a date, but they put like his return.
Right. So that just shows you like these television networks or these, I don't even know if it's going to be on TV over there. I'm sure somebody will pick it up, but he's still polarizing. He's still polarizing enough to generate some type of audience that is worth it for maybe advertisers or television networks. That's usually the thing. As I mentioned earlier, look at what Eddie Hearn told us the following morning after Jacobs defeated Chavez Jr. He told us he was in the arena. He heard those cheers, all that energy from that Phoenix crowd. Just, 95% of them were severely behind Chavez Jr. And he pretty much said, he's like he was surprised. He was like, man, this is actually kind of crazy. And he pretty much said, if this guy wins, he's like, man, he could be lined up for some pretty significant, money fights. He's polarizing. Chavez Jr. is polarizing whether people like it or not, and it's because of his dad. So, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's just crazy. We interviewed Eddie the next morning, and Chavez Jr. literally caused a mini riot, inside of that stadium or theater, whatever you want to call it. And Eddie still turned around to us and, kind of embarrassingly said, yeah, I'd work with him again. After, because he generates that much attention, that much money, and, those clips of the riot were everywhere, absolutely everywhere. So how much publicity did Matchroom get, good or bad publicity?
The Zone,
they were still everywhere. So, Eddie kind of was jokingly laughing, and he knew he probably shouldn't have said it, but he's like, "Yeah, I would work with him again."
Yeah, so. You could tell he hesitated when he gave us that answer, but he pretty much said. I think he also mentioned that Daniel Jacobs the fight week at the weigh-in or one of the pressers or something. That Jacobs after the presser was talking to Eddie like in the corner, and Jacobs told him, he was like, "You love Chavez, don't you?" And then Eddie Hearn was like, "I kind of do." He was like, "There's something about him that just kind of, he's drawn to like what I think he used some type of analogy saying like trying to make a diamond or trying to make a coal into a diamond or something like that." But I mean, you're right. He did say that on our show that he would probably work with him again, and he and the next day it was picked up by some outlets from who credited our show and pretty much said. People criticizing him, but I think he knew what he was doing. That's why he hesitated, but he still gave the answer.
And for people that don't know, he was also the fight was supposed to be in Nevada. He got banned in Nevada for missing a test. The fight got moved to Arizona, and if I remember rightly, he also missed weight, right?
Yeah. I think the pounds, the fights was contracted at I think 173 or something like that. I don't know. He was like 4 pounds over, man. Like.
So even after all that drama, Eddie Hearn still wanted to work with him.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like Martinez is going to come back, and do we know what did he fight on Friday? What weight class was that?
I think it was like middleweight. I'll just pull it up.
I'm sure it was some type of catch weight, right? I doubt it was a 160. I'm sure they were just like, oh, let's meet at 165 or something like that. If he really wants to fight Chavez, I think he has to expect to fight Chavez at like 170-ish, from 170 to 175. I think it's realistic. I mean, I can't believe we're talking about it. We're talking about it like it's actually going to happen, but it just probably is going to happen. And if Chavez Jr. wins, especially if he knocks him out, in some type of spectacular fashion, that's going to gain a lot of traction, especially on social media and a lot of Spanish news broadcasts. And it's just going to give more publicity to Chavez Jr. I'm telling you, that's how it's going to work. Did you find it?
It says that Martinez weighed in at 161 and his opponent weighed in at 165.
Oh, wow. See? I think it's realistic to expect that if he wants to fight Chavez Jr. again in a rematch, then it has to be at 170-ish, at least minimum 170 to 175. I mean, I don't think Martinez can expect Chavez Jr. to be like, oh yeah, I'll come down to 168. I'll come down to 165. Definitely not 160. Definitely not 165. But I mean, or it could be like this fight where Martinez returned. Martinez comes in at 165 and Chavez Jr. comes in at 175 or 173 or something like that, right?
Chavez just weighs in at what Chavez weighs in.
Pretty much.
You just fight at Chavez weight.
Pretty much. If Martinez really wants this fight, he's gonna have to bend to Chavez Jr.'s rules. Chavez Jr. is probably gonna be like, look, yeah, I'll do it as long as the money's right, and you're gonna have to let me weigh in at whatever I want. Not necessarily whatever he wants. I'm sure there's gonna be like a cap, but he's gonna be like, there's no rehydration clause. If I come in at 172, he's like, I can balloon up to 190 the next, like, it's going to be stuff like that. I guarantee you, because Martinez isn't, even at 45, 46 or whatever he is, he's not a light heavyweight. He barely looks like a super middleweight, right?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. You know, with all these people returning, like Oscar De La Hoya, Tyson, Roy Jones Jr., Evander Holyfield. So,
I mean, I guess. I mean, And then touching on the De La Hoya thing, I really don't think he's going to come back. I think he's just capitalizing on the publicity because of Tyson, of Roy Jones, now Martinez, mostly of Tyson and Roy Jones, honestly, because Tyson is such a universal casual brand. I mean, you see TMZ covering him every single week, you know, like you see all these other major global news agencies, media agencies covering him who never cover boxing. They're just general news sources or tabloids and stuff like that. I honestly think De La Hoya is just capitalizing on the moment of the publicity behind Tyson. So De La Hoya kind of threw his name in the box just to be relevant enough to try to gain that publicity, which honestly, from a marketing standpoint, really isn't. It's really not stupid. I mean, you know, I think he was picked up by TMZ as well, that he wants to come back, and some other major news outlets. He's just capitalizing on the publicity, whether people like it or not.
Did you see what Dana White said last night about him?
Do I really have to guess? I mean, we know he doesn't like the guy.
Someone asked him, you're like, "Oh, did you hear about Oscar De La Hoya's, return after the UFC event last night?" And Dana White was like, "Yeah, cocaine's expensive."
I'm telling you, man, that guy doesn't hold back. Man. Like, I don't know, man. And the crazy part about it is that, like, they used to be friends. Like Dana White was at the Canelo Triple G, the first one. I think he was there in person, and like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think it's wise to have Dana White as your enemy, especially when Dana White has said that he's going to get into boxing, and obviously he has a lot of resources behind him. And I don't know. I mean, whatever. It is what it is. Like, it's not like De La Hoya. De La Hoya is obviously a prominent figure in the sport, and so is his promotion company. And, even though people talk about like their demise or they don't have any champions or this and that, Golden Boy always finds a way, to pretty much stay a staple in the sport. But Dana White and De La Hoya, you can always bet on that entertainment to take up your day, right?
Yeah, it's always good to watch, good to read. Dana White doesn't hold back, so it's
Never.
kind of funny.
Never. So moving on to this past Saturday, the 22nd of August, from the finale at Matchroom Square Garden Fight Camp on DAZN, in the backyard of Matchroom headquarters. Is it still Matchroom headquarters as of this day? Or is it?
Yeah, they use it as obviously when he was growing up, he lived there, and then
right.
They just were going to sell it, and then they decided just to keep it and use it as Matchroom HQ. So,
hey, that works. But starting with the main event, probably the most significant moment of this past weekend, at least in terms of shock value and newsworthy headlines. Alexander Povetkin, with one of the best boxing shots I've seen, at least this year, knocks out Dillian White. Is it Dylan or Dillian? Can I get that right?
I always say Dylan, but I think it's Dillian when you watch the UFC and you watch the IFL TV interviews, and you kind of look at the way it's spelled.
Right. Okay. I think it's Dillian. So I want to make sure I get that right. Povetkin knocks out Dillian White with a sweet left-handed uppercut and some great head movement, and just sends him to the floor. White was knocked out before he even touched the floor. What did you think, Mike? Povetkin.
Looking at a lot of people on Twitter, I don't know whether they went for the Povetkin pick because of the odds. You could get him just to win the fight at like 14-1, and I've seen odds as high as like 18-1 for Povetkin to win by knockout. As the fight started, you could see that I thought Povetkin had kind of got old. I thought he looked kind of slow. He didn't have great foot movement. He'd only throw a couple of shots, and then he'd kind of try to like hold. Every time, I think after the first round, he went back to his corner. He looked absolutely fucked. I thought Dillian White after the second, third, and fourth round, his jab looked good. He still has that, bad, where he kind of leans over his front foot, like everyone was kind of pointing out afterwards. And then, he knocked Povetkin down twice in the fourth. I think, maybe he got a little bit lazy in the fifth. Came out, Povetkin had been throwing, kind of leaned down to his left, dropped his shoulder, and then was firing that left hook. You know, most of the time in the first few rounds, he was just firing it like into the body. Decided to mix it up. Boom, just came through. Absolutely punch perfect. He put absolutely every ounce of his soul behind that punch.
Connected him.
Yeah, knocked him out. You know, like you said, he was out before he even hit the floor. And I think that really was, I think Povetkin obviously, you know, being down twice and mixed it up with that shot. And I think it was just literally kind of one of those shots where he kind of threw it, hoping it, you know, hit him and knocked him out, because I think he knew it was game over. You know, he was losing because Povetkin was so happy. Like, you've seen Povetkin win fights before. He just kind of walks back to his corner.
Yeah,
because he's been boxing.
He's very mellow.
Yeah, he's very mellow. He was shouting, jumping up. His corner ran in and hugged him because they knew. I think they knew it's game over. Like, we're done. You know, he's going to knock us out soon. Kind of like when he fought David Price. You know, David Price, you know, rocked him. And I think Povetkin, if I remember right, he kind of like stumbled back against the ropes. And then he did the same thing there. He kind of like, you know, a punch out of nowhere and boom, just knocked out Price. I would have said that Povetkin is actually the better boxer than White. He just, you know, lacked a lot of physical things. He's a lot smaller. You know, Dillian Wright had a better reach. But in terms of like throwing combinations and, you know, just being an actual tactician, I thought Povetkin was obviously better. And that's why a lot of people kind of jumped on the odds. But, you know, after those first 4 rounds, he did look old. He looked, I thought.
No, he did.
It's very sluggish. And he just got that punch. You know, he meant it. It wasn't a fluke. I'm not trying to say anything like that, but it was just so sweet. Knockout of the year by far. I don't think anything's going to beat that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on that it should be looked at as of right now as a knockout of the year. Before obviously the end of the year, which we could see another one. They could obviously beat it, but I agree. The first 4 rounds, I thought Povetkin looked really old. You know, I believe he's 40 already.
41 in like 2 weeks, they were saying.
Yeah, so he's 40, 41. And I don't think it was unrealistic for people to think, especially the betting odds makers, to say that, oh, well, you know, Povetkin's got a lot of mileage on his tank. You know, he's been in a lot of wars. He's been in there with a lot of big, you know, prominent names in the heavyweight division. And like you said, the first 4 rounds, he went down 3 times. I think he went down 3 times in the 4th or the 3rd or something like that. And I don't think it was unrealistic to expect that, especially after not only the first knockdown, but the second knockdown, that Dillian Whyte was on his way to some type of stoppage or maybe a decision win. You would think after 3 knockdowns, it would be some type of stoppage, you know? But like you said, Povetkin, that Russian strength, man. And you know what? He didn't even really have like that much torque behind it. They were fighting on the inside. And then he just kind of, he gave him that head movement where he kind of, he missed his jab. I believe Dillian Whyte gave him a right jab, I believe, and then Povetkin just kind of sideswiped it, kind of went under it in a little bit, and then gave him that uppercut, which was awesome. That's literally, we were texting about that, you know, sometime after the fight, and we were talking about how, like, pretty much that's, at least to me, that's the definition of boxing. You know, like that's a skill. That's a skill. And like you said, Povetkin was obviously very happy. His corner was very happy. I think to me, like, you know, before we move on to Dillian Whyte and what his prospects are for now after this and stuff like that, I think to me, even though, you know, I know Povetkin's been popped for juicing in his career and stuff like that, but in the last, you know, 10 years or so, I think when you look at the landscape of the heavyweight division, I think Povetkin has to be named as like that guy that was never like, you know, the star of the division or maybe included as the star of the division, but he was always that guy that, like, okay, you know, if you want to put one name in each division throughout, you know, the last so odd years that really kind of will give you a fight, like he's dangerous, I think Povetkin is that guy, at least in the heavyweight division, at least for the, you know, maybe last 5-10 years, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that, because if you look at his record, he's only lost to Anthony Joshua and Klitschko.
Right.
You know, and he's had a lot of fights. He was scheduled to fight Wilder, and then he popped, and, you know, the fight got cancelled. And if you look at the Joshua fight, he rocked Joshua and was actually doing really well until, you know, the tide was turned in the other way, and, you know, Joshua got him out of there.
Right.
So, he's fought a lot of British people. I mean, he loves fighting British fighters by the looks of it. He beat Hughie Fury, he beat David Price, did very well against Joshua, knocked out Dillian White. So, he's been in there with, the upper echelons of the division. Just unfortunately, he was around during the Klitschko era. Then he was around during the Deontay Wilder era, Joshua and, Tyson Fury. So just unfortunately never, been able to get any of the titles. So.
No, right. No, you're right. And then, obviously White, it was obviously a big surprise to not only Dillian White, but to Eddie Hearn, his promoter, Matchroom and stuff like that. And I think one of the funny things is that the WBC had said that, if Dillian White wins, he will get a shot next at the winner of Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, which I think is hilarious. Like, because
Fury for 3 years.
Yeah, he's coming up on 1,000 days. I think that's what I saw. 1,000 days that he's been mandatory, and obviously, like, if that doesn't really show you the bias between these sanctioning bodies, like, what else are they gonna tell you? Like, it tells you it's money. It's their preference is certain fighters. I don't know. And then I think they also said, like, I think WBC Mauricio Sulaiman said that. Beforehand, I think he said after that Povetkin, even though he won, he doesn't get that spot as a mandatory, or, it was only if Dillian White won. Like, how does that make sense? Like, I get, like, Dillian White has been in that position for a while, but it's just like, but if the guy beats you, technically, like, he's, even though he beat him, or if he does beat him when he was talking retroactively, that he wouldn't get his spot. I don't know. I see it, but it sounds weird to me.
Yeah,
it sounds fishy.
It's like having a title on the line for only one person, even though they both made weight.
Yeah,
it's kind of odd. I can kind of see why he's saying that, because Dillian White spent those 1,000 days, going through like WBC Silver, WBC International, WBC Diamond, WBC Interim. He's jumped through all of those hoops, and because of the WBC keep pushing it back, and they obviously wanted to try and feed off Deontay Wilder as much as they could, and then obviously due to the Wilder Fury fighting 3 times, it's been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. But it's one of those situations where you look at Dillian White, and he could have sat at home, just fought nobody, fought a load of taxi drivers, and waited for his title shot. But, he dared to be great. He wanted to learn on the job. He fought, Joseph Parker. He fought Oscar Rivas. He took the Povetkin fight when he didn't really need to. It obviously ended up, falling flat on his face because he ended up being defeated by Povetkin. But it's one of those situations where, how often do we complain about, fighters not wanting to fight the best? They just wanted to fight easy people until, they get to like 32-0, and then they fight one good person, get beat, but they've already cashed in on those 32 victories. So it's kind of one of those where you have to kind of weigh it up. Like, what do we want as fans, and media? We always complain about something, and now, like, he actually went in there and fought probably one of the best resumes in the heavyweight division, and then we all, laugh at him, or,
right,
tell him he's an idiot for taking the fight. What do we want?
No, right. You're right. I completely agree. I also think White kind of looks a little bit dumb for all these years. It's not, he didn't look dumb for, obviously he's been mandatory with WBC, and they've just kind of pushing it. I'm sure the WBC behind closed doors loves this. They love that he lost, and especially that he got knocked out, because they don't want him to have the belt. They don't want to give him a chance to fight for the belt.
I don't know why. Because he gets big paydays. He's on pay-per-view. It's not like he's, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a heavyweight, like, it's not like that he's not earning any money. He doesn't put bums on seats. At the end of the day, we all know that the sanctioning bodies want fighters that generate income, because that's the only way they get their 9% or whatever it is. So they want them. That's why they always throw it to Canelo, because he generates crazy amounts of money. So the amount of money that they get is obviously large. Dillian White is the pay-per-view fighter. There's not many pay-per-view fighters in the world, yet they don't want him to have it. I'm sure he generates more income than Deontay Wilder did. Wilder couldn't even sell out in Alabama.
Right. No, you're right.
His hometown.
Yeah, you're right. I completely Tuscaloosa, Alabama over there. And I also think, like, I mean, you got to look at it from a geography perspective. And this is just me speculating. The WBC is headquartered in Mexico, and they also have an office here in I believe, in Los Angeles. And if Dillian White wins, he will be making some defenses of it in the UK. You know, obviously from a travel perspective, this is just me looking at like a common denominator here. From a travel perspective, to send your guys over there and stuff like that, like it's a lot longer to travel, to set up shop and stuff like that. Like, you know, whereas if you have a champion in the States, you know, it's a lot easier in terms of logistics, if that makes sense. Like, you know, obviously, I mean, and I'm just speculating here again, but I mean, if we look at the list of WBC champs, you know, I guarantee you that at least the more prominent ones, the money generating ones, are based in the United States, right?
I would have to look, but yeah. But I mean, Mauricio used to do it. He used to do it for Charlie Edwards, because obviously there was that fight where Mauricio was in the crowd where he was beaten by, you know, Martinez, but Martinez hit him when he was on the floor, and Mauricio ended up, you know, not reversing the decision. He ended up calling it a no contest. So, you know, Mauricio does, you know, he was flat. He flew out there to represent the WBC for Charlie Edwards. I mean,
that's a good point. Yeah.
So he's going to do it for Dillian White.
I mean, I honestly think it just like you said, it comes back to the money. To the money thing is that the Dillian White, he does generate ratings and he does fight on pay-per-view over there. But in terms of when you compare him to a Wilder, a Tyson Fury, an Anthony Joshua, you know, guys like that, I think that how they look at it in terms of getting a cut of their purse, it's totally there's a big discrepancy there. It's a drastic change, if that makes sense. Like that kind of maybe nullifies my previous argument about the whole travel. It's at the down the belts in the UK and this and that. Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua are such big stars now that somebody like the WBC would want their title on them because of the money and the ratings they generate. They're like, oh, they're way too big. Like, I mean, it's not that they're way too big. Like, man, like they're big enough in their own right that they have to, like, yeah, we have to play by those rules, just like Canelo, you know. Whereas I honestly think, like, even though you do say that Dillian White does generate ratings and fight on pay-per-view, and he does do well, and especially in the UK, more in the UK, I just don't think the WBC recognizes that because they use a comparison model to compare his stock to Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, and even Deontay Wilder, because Deontay Wilder, you said he doesn't even sell out his home city in Alabama, but he gets paid really well.
Well, that's just the PBC just working.
No, you're right.
Working in debt somehow.
No, you're right. But at the end of the day, the WBC gets a cut of that purse.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think White comes back and he does beat Povetkin, and then people, and obviously there's going to be people, if he beats him and especially if he stops him, there's going to be people, oh, there should be a trilogy. Povetkin deserves a third fight now because they split one. But that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. That's not in the cards. That's really not in the cards. I'd be surprised if there was a third fight, unless there's like nobody out there who wants to fight White, or he can't get one of these big guys again, and he's still screwed for like another 1,000 days. Then maybe, but I don't see being a trilogy. I think White is right to be the favorite again in the rematch, which I think Eddie Hearn said he wants to do in October, but I don't know if it's gonna really
December.
Oh, he wants to do it in December for White, the rematch?
Yeah, that's what they were saying afterwards. Yeah.
Well, I thought wasn't the whole tentative plan to have Dillian White win this fight against Povetkin and then fight Anthony Joshua in December? Wasn't that the tentative plan?
The tentative plan was supposed to be, I don't think it was kind of set in stone, but obviously Joshua's got to fight Pulev in December, either behind closed doors or, you know, if like a minimum crowd. Right. I think they're now trying to get those two maybe on the same schedule, so they're going to try to do the Povetkin and White rematch either in December, maybe on the undercard, but I think that'll obviously depend on how much the purses are going to be for, you know, that 4 heavyweights. That's going to be an expensive card, so.
Right. No, you're
That's
right.
what I was watching IFL TV and Boxing Social and everybody this morning, and that seemed to be what they were kind of throwing around those dates.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get it, but I don't think it's wise to think that Anthony Joshua and Dillian White will fight this year. I don't even think Anthony Joshua is going to fight this year. I think we're not going to see him until sometime next year, maybe March or April. Just because this is a wrench thrown into those plans, obviously. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But one other thing before we move on to the next topic here, don't you think that? Don't you think? But I saw somebody on Twitter say that Dillian White has always been overrated. What do you think about that?
In terms of actual boxing talent, I would say maybe so. But in terms of, his popularity, because he just gets everyone in fights. And I think people like that. But in terms of actual skill, I would not say, he's no Povetkin. But you've got to remember that a lot of the heavyweights aren't really technically that great. Like if you look at Dillian White, I don't think he's technically brilliant. Anthony Joshua, I think, is very robotic.
I think Fury's the best one.
By far, yeah. But then if you look at Wilder, he's technically terrible. Like he can't even stand on his own 2 feet. He falls around the ring. He literally relies on a 1 and a 2. Like he can't really throw uppercuts. He doesn't really throw any hooks. Sometimes doesn't even use a jab. He just literally relies on, winding up that number 2 and hitting home. So it depends on what you look at. I think people are just sometimes just kind of pissed off at the fact that he's never been a world champion, yet he's on pay-per-view. And right. I think that pisses people off. But, if you look at in terms of the numbers that he does and in terms of how exciting his fights are, because he's vulnerable. He got dropped by Rivas, ended up winning the fight, got, knocked down Povetkin twice, ended up getting KO'd, knocked Parker down, then got knocked down himself and was luckily saved by the bell because he was literally so gassed and tired that he was literally out on his feet in the 12th round. He's exciting to watch. And I think that's why, he is like he is, the popularity. Look at Dave Allen, prime example. Never been a world champion, not that good a boxer at all, but people relate to him. He's a nice guy. He suffers with depression and people can connect with him. Was he a pay-per-view fighter for that David Price fight? I think it was a pay-per-view card. I can't remember whether he headlined it or whether he was like a co-main. Similar sort of thing. Ryan Garcia, never been a world champion. He's not a world champion now. He might be on pay-per-view. So it really depends on the way you look at it. It depends. How would you weigh it up? Like, is in terms of ability? Maybe not. But in terms of popularity, putting bums on seats and, excitement, yeah, Dillian White, I would say, is where he is. Right.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, obviously he's still doing good for himself, so we'll see where it moves on. But it's going to be interesting to see how this heavyweight landscape pans out, at least for Dillian White.
Because you could be the best fighter in the world. The best fighter. Rigondeaux and Lara are probably 2 good examples. But unless you're exciting, you're not going to get paid and you're not going to be a pay-per-view. And, you could be a multi-world champion selling out arenas, but if you have that very boring Cuban style, no one's going to come and watch you.
Right. You either have, I think everybody knows this, but you either have to have some type of personality to be able to sell your fights outside of the ring, or be able to sell your fights inside of the ring with KOs or some type of drama or something like that. It has to be one or the other. Look at Triple G. Triple G was able to sell himself because he was knocking everybody out.
Because he can't. English isn't great, so he can't do it the other way.
Yeah, and also what happened too, which was great for his career, is that he was in the same division, pretty much the same weight class as the biggest star, arguably, behind Mayweather, the second biggest star at that time, behind Canelo Alvarez, which also helped because his name was associated with them. I mean, we know fighters call out other fighters, or they try to associate them with the interview so it can connect them to their names, and then these media outlets start talking about both names, like, oh, they're both talking about each other, or he's calling him out, and he's winning, and he's knocking everybody out. Like, it also helped that his name was able to be associated with the biggest star in boxing. So, but going back to the original point, he was knocking everybody out and made people notice. So we're like, oh, I want to see this guy knock everybody out. He has like 20 KOs in a row. So, like you said,
like you touched on then, is if you take away the Wilder fight, Tyson Fury before, he was like that. He used to sell it outside of the ring with his talking and his trash talk and his crazy entrances. But quite often his fights were terrible. Like in terms of, look at the Klitschko fight. If you rewatch the Klitschko fight, send you to sleep.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it was, from a boxing standpoint, it was tactical. Like, obviously we can still appreciate it. But you're right, though, to the casual fan, especially in the heavyweight landscape, the heavyweight division, people expect to see blows, to see knockouts, to see, just like Povetkin knocking out Dillian White, heavyweight boxing at its finest. A guy who was knocked down 3 times before in the previous round comes back with a great placed uppercut and sends the guy to the floor and knocks him out. So, but it's always going to be like that. There's always going to be like that. There's obviously an ingredients factor to really generate that popularity or that interest in your career, and you just kind of have to find it or decide on which route to go. That's pretty much it. Also on that card, the co-main event, another rematch from the initial fight, which was one of the best fights from a female perspective in the year. Katie Taylor gets a unanimous decision win in another hard-fought battle against Delphine Persoon for the WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBO lightweight titles. What'd you think of the rematch?
Great fight. I mean, I loved the first fight. I thought Persoon won the first fight. I thought this fight was literally like they just started the next round. The bell went. They both came out, and Katie Taylor at times would stick to her boxing, which she should have done, because Persoon really was just one of those fighters that just came out and just kind of throws as many punches as she can. Some of them are kind of like more like slaps than actual technique where she's gonna back Katie up, but she throws that many punches that she wins rounds. Katie at times got kind of dragged into Persoon's style of fight and just sat in the pocket with her. Like at the end of the is it the 12th round? Did they do 10 rounds or 12? I can't remember.
I think it was 10.
So at the end of the 10th round, they literally just stood in the center of the ring, just stood in the pocket and just traded blows, which is kind of good to watch. It probably, I would say, definitely up there with the best female fights I think I've really ever seen. Those two. I would watch a third. I think even Persoon agreed this time, because if you looked on Twitter, there was quite a few people that had Persoon winning. But Persoon was very respectful. She said that she didn't think she'd won. She didn't think she had the power at this weight to be able to back Katie up where she thought she did in the first fight. Because there was quite a few people that had Persoon ahead. I think Lou DiBella was one, celebrity, that boxing personality, that had Persoon winning. But, onwards and upwards, I think, Katie's probably going to look for another big name. Hopefully we see the Serrano fight, and, I wouldn't be adverse to, later down the line, they both go away, get a few more wins, and we have, Katie Taylor, Persoon 3, with a crowd, which I think would be great.
No, you're right. I think Persoon, even though she lost again, still keeps her name relevant in that division in female boxing. The plan is tentatively to have Katie Taylor and recently unified welterweight champion Jessica McCaskill likely go at it, and then maybe sometime next year. I'd probably at some type of catch weight or something, which, I mean, in terms of weight issue, McCaskill fighting Taylor from a weight perspective is actually a little bit better, because I know Cecilia Brækhus was weighed more, and it was going to be a little bit harder to find like a midpoint or something. So in terms of that, I guess it's good for both of them in terms of a competitive standpoint. But I think, like you said, even though Persoon acknowledged that she probably didn't win the fight, her name is still involved in the mix.
It's her style.
Yeah.
She just comes out and just throws and throws and throws. And because the 2-minute rounds, like Andy Clark kind of touched on, last week when we had him on the show, that she can just go hell for leather for 2 minutes, and then she's got a minute rest, and then she just goes again.
Right.
Crazy. There's not a lot of power and technique behind all the punches, but she just throws so many. Whereas, like Katie Taylor was the more polished boxer, and like Andy said, if you had like bars above the heads, like a computer game, I think Katie Taylor, every time she would connect, she'd probably knock off, more energy, more life than Pursoon does, but she just connects and hits like so many times.
Right.
It's good to watch, but in terms of, if you're a boxing purist, you may not like the technique, but it was just great, fun fight. You just sit back and, don't be so negative and just watch it as a fight, for fun.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, I think now the tentative plan, which was obviously the initial plan at the beginning of all this, at least at the beginning of the year, was Katie Taylor against Amanda Serrano. And then you mentioned Lou DiBella kind of going on Twitter and saying that he felt Delphine Pursoon took the fight. That doesn't really surprise me because I think he represents Amanda Serrano.
Yeah, he does.
And they've had issues with Katie Taylor. Obviously, the fight wasn't made and stuff, so that's not really a surprising tone. But obviously, it could be right because Pursoon did fight well. It was a close fight again. It was an action packed fight. So obviously there's a chance that she probably could have got the decision because they were close cards. At least two of them were. One of them was pretty wide. But I think honestly, if Katie Taylor and Jessica McCaskill are going to go at it, if I was Delphine Pursoon, I'd fight Amanda Serrano. In the meantime, right?
Yeah, why not? They're probably the top four, in and around those weight categories because obviously they kind of have to keep moving in between due to, not many big names and fights to be made. But yeah, I mean, why not? Strike while the iron's hot. If you're going to, make that money, get a few fights, get a few victories, and then, just call for the Taylor Pursoon fight because it's not many women's fights, I think, that we watch where, we all turn around and go, God, that was a good fight. I'd love to see that again. They generally tend to be either blowouts or, kind of boring, unanimous decisions. So
yeah,
it's just no strength in depth yet. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, that's a big factor. That's a big factor that people have to acknowledge. It's the depth of the women's division. So, but at least they're getting a lot of attention, and there's a lot of like Katie Taylor, Cecilia Brækhus, Jessica McCaskill now, the new unified champion at welterweight, Clarissa Shields and stuff like that. There's a lot of attention on it. They just need the depth. So hopefully as time goes by, it's going to take a while. It's going to take, years, but hopefully they're on their way there to make the divisions a little bit more appealing like UFC does,
Well, I think that's the problem. I think if you're a young girl and you're into combat sports in general, and you look at the path of boxing, or you look at the path of, joining, Bellator, UFC, or, One Championships, I think they would choose the UFC. Just, it's a brighter, more polished, very, well executed in terms of advertising. You've got like Amanda Nunes, Paige Van Zandt, who's just signed a huge, $1 million contract with bare knuckle boxing. I think personally at the minute, I think you would choose that route. So they need to try and make it, more appealing for this, the young girls that want to get into boxing.
You're right. Also on that card, Chris Kongo gets the 9th round TKO over Luther Clay for the WBO Global Welterweight title. Global? Is that a new title? What the hell's going on around here? What'd you think of Kongo's performance?
I thought it was a good fight, close fight, good in terms of, technique, probably one of the better fights in terms of that, out of the whole card. I thought the right person won, good finish to the fight, onwards and upwards for both of them. I think, even though he lost, I thought he looked really good, did Clay. So I don't think really, any of them are going to struggle to come back out of that fight. So
we'll see. Also on that card, Jack Cullen gets the split draw over Zach Chelli. Did I pronounce that right? I believe I did. What'd you think about that split draw?
Terrible decision. Absolutely terrible decision.
What?
Zach Chelli clearly won the fight, so I have absolutely no idea what the referee was watching there. I think pretty much everybody on, in the Twitter world kind of agreed with that. So, it kind of, I sat there and I thought, oh, here we go. Like if the, the Taylor Pursoon fight goes to the cards, like, what kind of crazy score are you going to come up with now after seeing that? I think even Eddie touched on it afterwards that, Zach Chelli really should have, taken the victory that night. So, Cullen really got away with one there.
Right. And we'll see. Alan Basic gets the second round TKO over Shondell Terrell Winters. What you think of that?
I think that was an autocorrect. It should be Alan Babbage. I think the autocorrect in the Word document did it. It was good kind of street fight more than boxing. Alan Babbage was one of the fighters that's been signed by Dillian Whyte. They keep calling him the Savage. He did quite a few funny interviews with Eddie Hearn just because he's one of those like kind of crazy, Russian guys that'll just fight anybody. So he kind of went in there with Shondell Winters, who had fought Parker before and actually went a few rounds with Parker and actually looked quite good against Parker. So I don't really know what happened because Babbage just went in there and just kind of blew him out. So I don't know whether Shondell was just scared of his power or he got clocked early on and just decided to back up because, he's kind of scared or whatever. But, Babbage kind of made easy work out of him. We dropped him a few times and luckily either the ref stopped it or, his corner threw in the towel. I can't remember exactly which, or maybe it happened at the same time. But, Babbage obviously called out pretty much everybody, was asking Eddie Hearn to give him the biggest heavyweight that he could find in his stable. So, he's a bit of a character, so whilst we have him around, he'll be fun, I think.
Hopefully. And then moving on also this past Saturday from the Microsoft Theater in downtown Los Angeles, it was Showtime on Fox as Showtime Shawn Porter gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Sebastian Formella. This was for the vacant WBC silver welterweight title. And also, I believe Formella was the IBO welterweight champion, which I believe he held, but I don't know if it was on the line. But, giving some credit to the IBO there. Bring them back, man. They might as well throw the IBO in there as a recognized major sanctioning body. I don't see what the difference is between all these other ones. Might as well throw them back in there. But, Shawn Porter returns after almost a year since I believe he fought Errol Spence and lost his title to Errol Spence in a unified matchup. Porter pretty much showed, the type of fighter he is. He's in your face. It looks like Formella pretty much. To me, it looked like Formella did have pretty good technical skills, and he was a good boxer. He obviously has a foundation, and he's good. But it's just Porter's just been in the ring with so many elite guys like Thurman, Garcia, Spence, and he's in your face. It's that pressure. It just doesn't stop. I mean, what'd you think of Porter's performance?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, really. He started fast and then just basically kept that usual pace, which, people can't normally handle. They finished with, Porter landed 304 punches and Formella only landed 148. So twice as much. I would have liked to have seen Shawn Porter get Formella out of there, either whether he, manages to knock him out or makes the referee stop it. Just because, Formella is not one of those big names. So I think when you get somebody like a Shawn Porter in there with somebody that's not generally a household name, you kind of expect them to try to, either knock them out or get them out of there. So, trying to make a bit of a statement since this is his first fight back since the Errol Spence fight. And I think I also saw on Twitter this was like an IBF eliminator. And I think now Porter's, one of the favorites to get in there with the winner of Spence and Danny Garcia. So we could get a rematch of Shawn Porter, Errol Spence, which was, a pretty good fight. And I think a lot of people were split. A lot of people liked Shawn Porter's, come forward style, all out attack. And some people actually had Porter beating Spence on that night.
No, you're right. Yeah. And that's a good point. How you said that this was like a double eliminator for Spence's IBF and WBC titles. So now it puts Porter back in the mandatory spot to get the winner of Garcia and Spence, which is, it's not a bad place to be. He loses the fight, he loses his title, he wins one more fight, and he's back in the pretty much almost in the driver's seat again. So, but I like Shawn Porter, man. I've always been a fan. I think that he's I think in terms of resume, I think it's him and then Danny Garcia who have fought all these guys now. I think as of right now, Porter's fought probably has the best resume in terms of fighting all the elite guys so far. And I think Danny Garcia is right behind him. I believe so. But, Porter's just in your face, man. He obviously shows you that he's going to give you that type of fight every single time. You can try to fight him. you can try to have a game plan to try to fight him however you want to fight him, but it's going to come down to you adapting to his style, and I think, and I know Terence Crawford has been in there in the mix. I know they mentioned him on the broadcast yesterday. And him and Porter's already said that he's tried to make that fight, or that he's want that fight. They've been talking, but I mean, honestly, Top Rank needs, if Porter was open to it, they need to just give him need to figure out the contract and give Crawford that fight, because obviously Porter's going to wait for Garcia and Spence to go at it, which I still don't think is going to happen realistically for Porter and Crawford to go at it, but I think Top Rank did miss the boat by not making a fight with Porter when Porter was vocal about trying to make that fight.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think this kind of goes back to what, like we touched on, Dillian White taking the fights that he didn't need to take whilst he was waiting for that mandatory shot. And this is an example of where, we're looking at people on the PBC side and the Top Rank side that, can't fight each other, won't fight each other. Which one is it? Essentially, I think people like Danny Garcia and Shawn Porter, by looking at their resume, their body of work over the years, I think they'll fight anyone, especially Shawn Porter. The thing is, I think a lot of people don't want to fight Shawn Porter because of his style. And, a lot of people aren't the same after you fought Shawn Porter. Like, he takes a lot out of you with, he's got a rough and ready style. He'll headbutt you, he'll hit you with his elbows. He's just a bull.
No, right. You're right. You're completely right. I mean, it is what it is, but he's back in the mix. Also on that card, one of the most, I would call him not an anomaly. I don't think that's the right word, but 6'6" Sebastian Fundora, who I believe fights under Zamfir Promotions, right? With Samson Lokowitz, something like that. But the thing behind Sebastian Fundora is not that he's his height, that he's 6'6". It's the fact that he's 6'6" and he makes 147 pounds, Mike. What the hell is that?
It's insane. I saw this fight, Sebastian Fundora against Nathaniel Gallimore, and I was like, dude, that's a good, like one of those sneaky good fights. And it was one of those where I looked at it and I was like, you know what, if Fundora wins this, then, he is, pretty legit, because the problem we've always had, and I think we kind of both agreed on this, was 6'6", but he doesn't fight like a tall fighter. He doesn't sit there and, use his reach, just sit on the outside. He actually fights on the inside, which is just so bizarre, because you just sit there and you think you'd use, your height and your reach just to, win rounds quite easily, just dominate people. But yeah, he went in there, got the KO round 6 over Gallimore, and there's not many people that easily hand Gallimore. So great victory for him. On to bigger and better things. And he was saying afterwards, like, I think he only had 3 weeks preparation for this, but if he's going to be a world champion and he wants to be a real professional boxer, then he'll fight anybody.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. That's crazy. Making 147 pounds at 6'6". I mean, I think that's wild. Because I'm 6'7". I'm about 6'6". It's just, I'm pretty much the same height, and I can never make 147 pounds. That's wild, man. That's ridiculous. But hey, you know what? From a kind of going back from a marketing standpoint, it's interesting, because I could see, especially as he starts gaining more traction and more wins, and he's on more platforms like that, like Fox and stuff like that. I can see major news outlets using that as a headline. 6'6" boxer fights in a 147-pound division. A lot of casual readers are going to be like, "What the hell?" And they'll click it and they'll read about it, or they'll see whatever the content is. It's a headline that will catch your attention. So, I'm sure. Obviously, he could fight at bigger weight classes all the way up to heavyweight, obviously, but making 147 pounds, obviously that's the money division. And if he could do it and it gets him marketing and it stands him out from the rest, why not? But nobody's going to want to fight him. Nobody's going to want to fight him because he's way too tall. People already didn't want to fight Paul Williams when Paul Williams was at 6'2", making 147 pounds. They're not going to want to fight somebody who's 6'6", like, even if the talent discrepancy is very big in between both fighters, like let's just say like a Spence and a Fundora, like that height and that it's crazy. I don't know. It could work though. I mean, you never know, but
he can box. He can definitely box. He's got skills. He doesn't just rely on, his height and his reach, because weirdly he doesn't really use it.
Right. Crazy, man. Crazy. Moving on. This past weekend on ESPN Plus, Joe Smith knocks another guy out of the ring essentially as he stops Alidir Alvarez on the latest main event on, as I mentioned, on ESPN Plus. And if people remember, Joe Smith knocked out Bernard Hopkins in Inglewood, California, over here at the Forum a couple years ago. He knocked him out of the ring and into retirement. And now he knocks out Alvarez, not completely out of the ring like he did to Hopkins, but he pretty much fell out outside the ropes. I mean, Joe Smith, man, he's really making the most out of his career.
Yeah, good, fun fight. I think I had Joe Smith winning every single round up until, you managed to get him out of there. Alvarez just looked old overnight. I think he's 36 now and actually decided to retire after this loss. But, Joe Smith just took it to him. Good fighter, always good to watch. This was for a WBC eliminator. So, he's going to fight either Umar Salimov or Makazam Vlasov for the vacant WBO title, which was obviously previously held by Sergey Kovalev. So,
right.
Big fights coming up.
Joe Smith, man, he has that same story as Andrew Cancio. They have similar stories where they still work on the side. They still have their full-time jobs or what have you, and they were had some type of titles and stuff like that. So it's an interesting story, man. Joe Smith really lining up his paydays right here and putting in a lot of work into the sport. Good for him, man. I'm a fan. I'm not ashamed to admit I'm a fan. I like him. He's
one of those guys, people can relate to him because he works a full-time job. I think him and his dad own a business. It's like tree trimming or,
right.
He cuts down trees or something like that. And
it's crazy, huh?
It's clever because obviously, you're not guaranteed money all the time. If you lose, then your purses disappear or, injuries and stuff like that. So if anything ever happens or when he retires, he's set. He's got a business to go to, which some boxers don't. So it's clever. Clever.
Co-main event, Rob Brandt, 26-2, gets the 5th round technical decision over Vitaly Kopalenko. What'd you think of Brandt's performance up to that point?
I thought it was good. Rob Brandt obviously clearly won every round up to the point where Kopalenko decided to retire. He's got good energy. He always looks like he comes in, fit and healthy. He's obviously training now with Terence Crawford and Jamal Herring. Those guys always seem to be, beasts. They always come in a lot of running. Obviously follow all those guys on social media. So non-stop training over there with Big Bomac. So good victory. And then obviously, we'll see what happens from there. I think he's aiming for a 3rd fight with Murata, trying to gain back the title that he lost. He beat Murata, rematch, lost it. So I think he's trying to, go for a 3rd.
We'll see. And Julian Rodriguez gets the 1st round stoppage over Anthony Lariano. Julian Rodriguez 20-0, 20 wins, huh? Does that mean he's ready for somebody significant with all those wins, undefeated?
It looks like it. Decent record. Good TKO stoppage in this one. Pretty much said he's ready to fight anybody at the 140 division. So being with top rank, perfect. Really, they kind of dominate that division. So I think what he turned around and said, line him up. So
yeah, and they just picked up PBC. Scratch that. It would have been great if I know they made offers, I believe, to Regis Prograis, but Regis Prograis and Maurice Hooker did sign recently with the PBC. So, and they kind
of crazy because Jose Ramirez and Josh Taylor hold all the titles in that division. So I don't know why.
But I mean, but Regis Prograis and Hooker are able to fight at 147. So they're probably hoping, hey man, if I can get a good payday with one of these welterweight guys, they're going to do it.
Regis will be small at 147, though, right?
So he'd be small.
So Crawford, but
Yeah, he'd be smaller, but like I think he'd still fit in. Hooker is the one that really belongs at 147. He's a big kid.
yeah.
So
Interesting.
and also the guy who's 15 minutes of fame is still going. Clay Collard gets the second round TKO over Maurice Williams. Collard's got a lot of attention right now, at least in the boxing world, in the niche part of the sport. What'd you think of that?
The legend of Clay Collard continues. He's 5-0 in 2020, which I don't think any fighter will get to this year. 3-0 in the bubble, I believe. I think he's obviously leading the race for the 2020 Fighter of the Year, or Fans Fighter of the Year. He's very awkward, has a very different style, but maybe it's just the fact that he comes from MMA. He throws punches from very awkward angles, which I think a lot of your traditional fighters, I kind of think it throws them off because they don't expect it. And it's one of those feel-good stories. I think everyone, likes to see the fact that, he went to MMA, it didn't really work out. He came over to boxing, got a lot of draws, a couple of losses early in his career. But, since the turn of this year, he's gone 5-0 with top rank. And I think, everybody loves that underdog story. So, long may it continue for him.
Long may it continue, of course. And then rounding out that card. And no, I don't think I mentioned this from the bubble, obviously, at the MGM Grand on ESPN Plus, another top rank event. But rounding out that card, Duke Reagan gets the first round stoppage, like one of the previous fights, over Luis Alvarado, who suffers the second loss of his early career. What do you think of that?
Not really, kind of hard to tell. Obviously, he's pretty skilled. He set up the finishing punch really well. It only lasted 54 seconds. So, listening to what Andy Clark said about him, Andy Clark was high on him because he covers the amateur scene. So good. Hopefully they can get him out as much as they can during this coronavirus. Obviously, he's only 23. That was his pro debut. So try and get him some fights, get some experience. But I think he may get fast-tracked, with that very expansive amateur career. Another guy that's going to probably, hit the scene running.
Right. I agree. And then moving on to this upcoming weekend, the 29th, Saturday, the 29th of August, from the BT Sports Studio in London on ESPN Plus. Would you call him a rising heavyweight prospect, soon to be contender? Daniel Dubois returns as he comes back against Ricardo. Is it Snyder's?
Yeah,
for the WBO International title. Obviously, Dubois is the main attraction here. So, what do you think about this matchup? Obviously, Dubois and Joe Joyce were supposed to initially fight this year, but obviously, I think COVID obviously affected that. So, what do you think about this?
It's supposed to be a stay-ready fight for Daniel Dubois because obviously, Joe Joyce had one recently in which he won. And it looked like they were trying to reschedule the fight. I think it was for October between Dubois and Joyce. But in a recent interview with Joe Joyce's manager, Sam Jones, I think it sounded like they may put it back even longer due to I think they want to get a crowd in there because of the amount of money they're probably paying the guys. They need to have some sort of income. But I think it's going to be a ready-made opponent for Daniel Dubois. Someone he probably goes in there, blows out, looks good against. And then, hopefully, fingers crossed, we get to see that huge, British dust-up between him and Joe Joyce. Obviously, we'd like to see it behind closed doors, but, if it doesn't financially make sense for Frank Warren, then it's probably not going to happen until they can at least get, some kind of crowd in there.
Right. I just think that the Dubois-Joe Joyce fight, it's appealing because of who they are, especially in the UK, but I don't see it being action-packed, mostly because of Joe Joyce.
What, you think Dubois will just take him out, or?
Probably. I think it's going to be an early night.
The problem is I think Joe Joyce is, when you look at him, he has a very awkward style, and I think he's just one of those guys that maybe if you're in the ring with him, you kind of appreciate what he does because, he has a very good amateur pedigree, and so far as a pro, he's been in there with a couple of names, which obviously we all know, Stavern, and didn't he also get in there with, was it Jennings? And he took Jennings out?
Brian Jennings, yeah.
Yeah, when, those two Stavern maybe just get blown out by Wilder, but not many others. And Jennings, he's no knockover. So I think he's just one of those styles. Maybe when you're watching him, he seems like he's very slow, very ponderous. But yet again, his name is Juggernaut, and the fact that like he's got a great chin and he just goes in there and he just winds you down. He's like the Terminator. He just keeps coming at you. That eventually he just pummels you into submission.
Pummels into submission. That should be his tagline. If they use that, they better give us credit. The co-main event of that event, Sonny Edwards 14-0 goes up against Thomas Essomba for the IBF International Superfly Championship. What do you think of this fight?
I think it's another one, another pick for Sonny Edwards. You know, I think someone just to really get him back out, you know, due to the COVID, get him a victory, and then hopefully get some bigger names at the super flyweight division. Because for us boxing hardcores, you know, there's some good names in and around the super flyweight. So it'd be good to see, you know, him out, you know, maybe the turn of next year against one of the bigger names in that division.
And then Sam Maxwell 13-0 goes up against Joe Hughes 17-5-1. What's your take on that fight?
Good fight. I actually quite like Sam Maxwell. It looks like he's, you know, turned the corner a little bit and he's, you know, improving. You know, Joe Hughes, ex-European champion. You know, he's got 5 losses on his resume, but you know, he's no pushover. So that should be a good test, really, for Sam Maxwell.
Good test. And then Willie Hutchinson 11-0 goes up against Luke Blackledge. Sorry, 26-9-2. What do you think of that fight?
Willie Hutchinson, trained by Dominic Ingle, good fighter, still, you know, kind of working his way into the pro game after having, you know, a pretty good amateur career. You know, coming from the Ingle gym, he's surrounded by, you know, very talented fighters, you know, people popping in there like Billy Joe Saunders. You've got Galahad coming out of that gym and, you know, many others. So, you know, Willie seems to be pretty good from what we can tell. You know, I think this should be somebody that gives him more rounds than normal. So, good test. But I see Willie Hutchinson, you know, should take it.
Willie Hutchinson. And then he's opponentless. David Adelaya, 2-0. It goes up against the dreaded, the famous, the infamous TBA.
Tough. You know, TBA, very experienced. You know, had many fights, sometimes fights multiple fights a night on the same card, as we've seen. So, you
undefeated.
But looking at David Adeleye, he looks like a good prospect. I think anyone they really put him in there for, he should blow him out. You know, David Adeleye is huge. He looks the part. You know, whether he's going to be, you know, be technically good, we'll see over time. Been in there and sparred with Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury, you know, has said that, you know, that he seems a good prospect. Tyson always seems to test himself when he's with camp. He normally gets a lot of young, hungry guys in there. So, you know, he's generally a good. He has a good assessment of all the young guys coming through. So he says he's good. I'll agree with Tyson.
He says he's good. We'll agree. Mm-hmm. And then rounding off this weekend from the bubble once again at the MGM Grand on regular ESPN, Jose Ramirez, the unified WBC and WBO super lightweight world champion, defends both of his titles against Victor Postol, the veteran Victor Postol, who's been in quite a few fights over the last several years. I don't think this is going to be competitive. I think Postol is past his prime. I'd want to be surprised because I like Postol, especially when he beat Lucas Matisse out here at the StubHub years ago. But I mean, I remember when Crawford beat him. That was in Vegas as well, I believe, at the MGM Grand. I think that was Crawford's first pay-per-view. Which because they needed to pay both of them or they needed to make money off of it, but it didn't do that well. But I like Jose Ramirez. I'm glad he's coming back and he's doing a defense of his title and stuff like that. But I don't think this is going to be competitive. I think Ramirez is going to mop the floor with him.
Whoa.
Yeah, okay. I'm going that route. I'm doing it.
But I'll be honest, you know, I used to think Jose Ramirez was kind of a little bit protected because they used to make so much money with him up in Fresno. You know, he had a breakout performance, in my opinion, when he fought Mo Hooker. And I was like, you know what, man, maybe I was wrong. You know, maybe he is the real deal. This is another opponent. I agree. I think Jose Ramirez should really win this. But Postal's only ever been beaten by some of the really best. You know, like you said, he's been beaten by Crawford. So it's not like
it's been years, though. When's the last time Postal's fought anybody significant since Crawford? Or, you know.
I'd have to look at who he beat to get into this position, to be honest with you. But I think, Postel is older. I think Ramirez should win, but I don't think Ramirez going in there and just blasting him out. I think, Postel will give him rounds. I think he'll make him work. And I think it's another performance that we'll be able to look at Ramirez and say, you know what? He is the real deal. He is, he's a world champion. He's not just holding that title.
Yeah, no, I could agree. I agree. I agree that I think initially Jose Ramirez was kept in Fresno up in Northern California because he was selling out that arena up there and they were making money with him and they were milking that. I agree with that. He was a little bit protected, but I think you kind of have to throw that out the window. I never doubted his talent. I always recognized the talent, even though he was up there and they were keeping him in Fresno to sell tickets. I could always, from the eye test, I could always tell, like, no, this guy's good. He's got talent. And then, like you said, him beating Mo Hooker, which was an exciting fight, I think that you definitely have to give him credit after that. So I like Ramirez, man. I think he's one of the best fighters at 140, maybe even one of the best fighters in the whole sport. And he's honestly the only, from a top rank standpoint, he's honestly the only significant name that could possibly move up to 147 and fight Crawford, because Crawford obviously can't get any people from PBC. But I say Ramirez stops Postal in inside 7, maybe 6. No, 7. I'm saying 7.
I could see that. I think Ramirez may stop him in the later rounds. I think he may, just wind him down. Postal's now 36. He hasn't really fought too many times over the last 5 years. I think some years he's only fought once. I think last year he fought twice. So right. I think, maybe old father time may give him his third loss. He's only lost to Crawford and Josh Taylor, so he's not lost to...
I mean, he's been in there with some good guys, though.
Yeah. I mean, he has, like you say, he's been in there with Matisse. So I think, it's probably somebody that Top Rank have looked at and picked and said, you know what, Ramirez should really beat Postal. He's another name onto the resume. Ramirez wins this. Hopefully we get the unification between him and Josh Taylor. And I think one, if not both of them, may step up to 147 money division. Cheddar Ching, get some big cash against, Terence Crawford, and maybe do a round robin of those guys at 147.
How much do you think Ramirez is getting any type of pressure behind the scenes from Top Rank to go up to 147 because they're in desperate need of some type of significant opponent for Crawford?
I think that, they may have had a conversation about that, told him, like, hey, we'll give you Postal, we'll give you Josh Taylor, and then you can step up and, regardless of, win, lose, or draw against Josh Taylor, you guys both step up to the 147 division, which is the money division. And because Crawford is, when you've got people like, Kell Brook, Chris Van Heerden, I'm trying to think of other crazy people that they've looked at sticking Terence Crawford in with. It's no good. Like PBC, whether they are holding, all their guys hostage and laughing at Terence Crawford because they know he's got nobody to fight.
What would you think, we give somebody like Ryan Garcia and, Canelo or something, all this shit because like they say like, oh no, I don't want this opponent. I want to fight somebody good, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, or they don't want to fight certain people and stuff like that. Do you think Crawford should do that with Top Rank? I mean, like, yeah, it looks bad on the promoter-fighter relationship, but, I mean, it at least puts some heat to make those fights or to not make those fights. Like, do you think Crawford needs to do something like that?
I think we've said it more than once on the podcast. Yeah, I think he does. I think he needs to put pressure, like, whoever he fights next, afterwards, jump on the mic and, call him out, do a WWE style, like that.
I think he needs to sound that horn now. It's not whoever he fights next. I think he's overdue for that. Because, like, unless he fights somebody prominent next, which in terms of prominence, it would have to be one of the PBC guys. I mean, who else is out there who could give him that type of marquee matchup? I think that horn needs to be sounded now, because I think the biggest name that he could fight, and he's not really the same anymore, is Kell Brook.
I think if we carry on like we are, I think that's who we'll see. I think they'll throw money at Kell Brook, because he's known on both shores. He's known obviously in England. He's known over here from his time against Shawn Porter, and I think it'll be a retirement fight for him. And Terence will go in there, probably beat him if Kell can even make 147 anymore.
Well, I don't think he can. But whatever. Well, whatever. It's going to be interesting though. And then rounding off that card, Arnold Barboza, friend of the show. He's been on the show before. 23-0. Puts up his undefeated record against Tony Luis, 29-3. Barboza should win this fight. I think after this, especially at his record, and he's getting a lot of praise and a lot of attention now. I think Barboza needs to fight a name after this fight. What do you think?
I would agree with that. Obviously he's in the same weight division as Josh Taylor, Ramirez. Ranked 13th in the world on BoxRec, so I think you're right. He's undefeated, so he's somebody that some of the big names may want to fight just to take his O. Get an unbeaten prospect on his record. Just needs to carry on like he did before, and hopefully get a few KOs against people. Draw that attention. Because he's got a lot of decisions on his record. He's not loud and brash and go out there and brings attention to himself. So he needs to either, jump on the mic or, let his hands do the talking and, start, smoking a few people.
Smoking him. Arnold Barboza. But yeah, I'd like to see him get like a pretty decent opponent after this fight. And then maybe we can, maybe after this weekend's fight, we can get him back on the show in the coming months. And then maybe we can get a call out. Maybe he'll call somebody out on the last round. What do you think, Mike? Can we do that?
Could always reach out, see what he says.
Maybe.
Jose Pedraza, they're both from Top Rank, right?
Yeah, that could work. I think Pedraza still got some left. Maybe. I think.
He's a name on your record, right?
Yeah. Oh, but that was a lot of fights. It's been a while since we went through a lot of fights like that in depth and in detail. But it was nice to go through all these cards. Obviously, it's great that boxing is in the swing of things. All these sports are in the swing of things all over the world now, which is great. Not great not only for fans, but for the television audience. Oh, and then one more thing before we sign off. The football stadium, the American football stadium out here in L.A. in Inglewood, California, SoFi Stadium for the Los Angeles Rams and Los Angeles Chargers, I believe just opened in terms of being able to use the field. It's pretty much, I think it's done. Because the football team there started having like scrimmages. And then they've been posting video of inside and using the big old screen and all that stuff. So, that's obviously another location to be looked at to be staging mega fights. And obviously it would have to be a mega fight, like a Canelo and maybe a Triple G or something like that. But
that's two, because obviously you've got the one in Vegas as well.
That's right.
You've got two big stadiums, vying for some big fights. That'll be
yeah. So that gives Los Angeles another arena to work with, but obviously it would have to be a mega fight to at least put enough butts in seats there, because I think it's 50, 60,000. I don't know. It's a big stadium. It's a football stadium. Yeah. It's huge, but it should be interesting. But signing off here. Before we sign off here, go ahead and tell people where they can follow us online, Mike.
So at The Last Round 12 on Twitter and Instagram. And obviously join us next week. We'll be reviewing all the fights we spoke about and obviously previewing the Jamel Herring against Jonathan Oquendo, which is coming at you from the Bubble, MGM Grand. Obviously on the line is a potential Jamel Herring and Carl Frampton fight. So
good luck to Jamel Herring on that, because he's had some bad luck with this whole COVID-19 situation. So hopefully this works out, man. Hopefully this works out, because he's been, I can tell he's been frustrated because of this. He's also a friend of the show. He's been on the show before, but I'm sure he's very frustrated about not being able to fight, and hopefully this is it. How much would it suck if the day before or the day of, hey, he got it again, or it got scrapped because of this? Man, what a turn of events, man. 2020 sucks. It really does.
I'm frustrated because, we should have pretty much had that fight by now, or it should be, scheduled, and, we should only be a few weeks away from that fight. So, if they're willing to put that on behind closed doors during COVID, it's one of the better fights that we've had. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So thanks again, guys, for listening, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. We appreciate it. And like Mike said, tune in next week as we review and preview the next events coming up in the sport of boxing. So for my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.